Chapter 52 Picking and Picketing. Lucia and Maria Mendoza, 18 and 17, stumbled out of bed at 2 a.m., dressed in the dark, went into the kitchen of their adobe house, made a lunch of tacos and soda pop, and filled a thermos with hot soup. Then, they woke their dad and their younger brother. Soon, the four of them were heading north, toward the border between Mexico and the United States. They were on their way to pick lettuce in California. Each of them expected to make $16 that Tuesday. It wasn't much, but it was more than they could earn at home. They would use short-handled hoes that kept them bent over all day. It was hot, dusty, back-breaking work. The Mendozas were soon part of a line of cars making for the picking fields. These Mexican farm workers were entering the United States legally. They were wanted to help harvest crops to feed people across the nation. But some of them would stay in the United States illegally. Hundreds of thousands of them had already done it. Most of those illegal immigrants had little schooling and few marketable skills. They were crowded in cities and poor districts known as barrios. Their children needed to go to school. They needed job training and help. All that cost taxpayer money. Some Americans resented them. Many said the Mexicans took jobs from American citizens, especially from Mexican Americans. It wasn't their fault that they took those jobs. The growers wanted them instead of Americans because they would work for less money. They could live on less. Life in Mexico was cheaper than life in the United States. Once they were across the border, the Mendozas parked their car and walked to a place where workers were hired for agricultural jobs. By 3:30 a.m., they were settled just behind the driver in an old, rattletrap bus heading north toward lettuce fields. Most of the 46 passengers tried to sleep. They knew they had a long ride ahead of them, and it was still dark. Later, one passenger would remember that they had been going very fast when the driver missed a curve, and the bus became airborne, crashing into the bank of a canal, bouncing off that bank to the other bank, and settling in a shallow waterway. All the seats in the old bus flew out of their sockets in a mess of arms, legs, twisted metal, and broken glass. 19 passengers were trapped in the bottom of the bus. They drowned in 2.5 feet of water. The four Mendozas were among them. Cesar Chavez wept for Lucia and Maria and the others who lay in silent caskets. Chavez was an American of Mexican heritage. Like most of the 2,000 mourners at a special funeral mass for the victims, he was a devout Roman Catholic. Everyone knew Chavez. He was the leader of the Farm Workers Association and famous. They knew he cared about people, especially farm workers. They wanted to hear what he had to say. Speaking in Spanish, Chavez told them, "This tragedy happened because of the greed of the big growers who do not care about the safety of the workers and who expose them to grave dangers when they transport them in wheeled coffins to the field. The workers learned long ago that growers and labor contractors have too little regard for the value of any individual worker's life. The trucks and buses are old and unsafe. The fields are sprayed with poisons. The laws that do exist are not enforced. How long will it be before we take seriously the importance of the workers who harvest the food that we eat?" Chavez knew all about harvesting food. He had been a migrant worker himself, traveling from bean fields to walnut groves to grape arbors, following the harvest of the seasons. That meant living in a tent or whatever room could be found. When he was a boy, it meant changing schools as often as he changed picking fields. It meant sometimes not having shoes or a bathroom to use. By the time Caesar graduated from 8th grade, he had attended 38 different schools. There was something special about Chavez, although it was hard to decide quite what it was. He had a pleasant, round face with brown skin and dark, straight hair. There was nothing out of the ordinary about that. He was a gentleman, and he didn't boast or call attention to himself. But when he had a job to do, he did it carefully and well. He could be trusted. He was honest, thoroughly honest. So when people needed help, they often turned to him. Fred Ross, an organizer who came to California to try to help the farm workers, heard about Cesar Chavez and gave him a job with a community service organization, which helped poor people deal with many kinds of problems. Chavez was soon helping those people find housing, medical care, food, and if they needed legal aid, a lawyer. He got them to register to vote, and he made them realize the power of the vote. Then, he began to think about starting a labor union for farm workers. A labor union is an organization of people, usually all doing the same kind of work, who get together to try to make life better for themselves. Factory unions are easy to organize. Most of the workers are together in one place. But getting agricultural workers organized isn't easy at all. In California, farm workers labored on thousands of farms that stretched the length of the state. Chavez knew that many growers took advantage of workers. They paid them little. They ignored unsafe conditions. They got their children to work even though that was against the law. And sometimes they cheated them on their pay. By themselves, the workers had no power. But if Chavez could organize them into a union, they could demand fair wages and safe conditions. Cesar Chavez had a wife, 8 children, and that steady job with the CSO. When he told his wife he wanted to quit his job to try to start a union, what do you think she said? She knew the family might go hungry if he had no regular work. What would you say? Helen Chavez said, "Okay." She understood that if La Causa, the cause, were successful, it would help millions of people, and, knowing Caesar, Helen Chavez thought that there was a good chance it would be successful. It was 1962, and Cesar Chavez started going from farm to farm, talking to workers. 3 years later, his Farm Workers Association voted to join Filipino farm workers in a strike against the grape growers. The workers refused to pick grapes until they got better pay and better working conditions. Then, the growers hired other pickers. Union members marched near the grape fields with signs that said huelga, which means strike in Spanish. Chavez convinced some of the new pickers to stop work and strike with them. Grapes began rotting because no one was picking them. The growers were furious. Union members were attacked and beaten. The police helped the growers. Cesar Chavez had been inspired by Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and his own religious beliefs. He insisted that the farm workers fight with peaceful marches and prayers. Nonviolence, he told them, took more courage than violence. He also believed that it achieved more. It appealed to the conscience of good people everywhere. Chavez needed to draw attention to La Causa. He decided that a 300-mile march across much of California might just do it. He got university students and religious leaders to agree to march with the farm workers. Look at a map and find some place that is 300 miles from your home. Now imagine walking that far. Chavez's feet became blistered and his legs swollen. He could hardly walk, but he kept going. Television cameras whirred. Suddenly, everyone knew about La Causa. Some farm owners called Cesar Chavez a communist. He wasn't. But most people believed he was on the side of justice and fairness. Finally, a few growers signed contracts with the union, but most still would not. About this time, the Farm Workers Association was renamed the United Farm Workers. It became part of a national union, the AFL-CIO. Chavez announced a boycott. He was going to ask people across the United States not to buy grapes grown in California. But boycotts worked slowly, and some of his union members were impatient. They wanted to use violent methods. Chavez had to do something to control them, and to make the growers pay fair wages. He did what Gandhi did. He went on a fast. For 25 days, he ate no food. Finally, 26 growers signed contracts with the union. Cesar Chavez started eating again.